Antic, Atari 8-bit podcast.
Change the curvature of the sine wave just via software. And that was a concept which was revolutionary in those days.
We were criticized by a lot of the top names in computers back in the 80s as how can these, this small company in an apartment in New York City come up with something that we've been working on for years and we can't do.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Late last year, I received a batch of Atari discs. One of the discs was labeled Virtuoso Play Mode Sampler. It was a music demonstration disc from Virtusonics, a company I had never heard of. Thanks to some old articles in Antic magazine, I learned a bit about the product and the company. In 1985, Nat Friedland first wrote about the Virtuoso software. Virtuoso is such a unique new approach to music making that it's not easy to describe. Virtuoso gives you a user-friendly method of tapping the extremely fast and powerful changes that a computer can control in every aspect of music performance. It bypasses the limits of traditional music notation and uses an almost self-explanatory color graphic display that delivers mathematical insights into the structure of music. In technical terms, Virtuoso is a sound generator that produces 4 voices from the POKEY chip. You can make instant real-time changes in the voices in any of 6 parameters. 4 computers running Virtuoso can be linked together to have up to 16 independent channels controlled by one Atari. Virtusonics was primarily 3 people: Frank Schwartz, the programmer, Joseph Lyons, the music guy, and Richard Lewis, the CEO. I have interviewed 2 of them. First, you'll hear my February 15, 2017 interview with the programmer/R&D director, Frank Schwartz. Then, you'll hear the February 10, 2017 interview with CEO Richard Lewis. I haven't been able to interview the other partner, Joseph Lyons, who is serving 24 years to life in prison. After our interview, Richard Lewis sent me an envelope of papers and discs. The material includes the preliminary version of Virtuoso software and the final release, which by then was called Virtuoso Desktop Performance Studio. Boxes, manuals, flyers and advertising slicks, and stock prospectuses. I scanned and digitized all of this material, which is now available at the Internet Archive. Here's my interview with Frank Schwartz.
I used to be involved with the PDP-11 development team for Digital Equipment Corporation, and was involved in microcode and the like. Mm-hmm. And I suppose I left digital somewhere around 78, maybe. Yeah, something like that. And for a while I worked in robotics and developed some really pretty amazing factory robotics systems. And
like for automotive or what?
Actually for cosmetics, Avon Cosmetics, and for Caldor, and who I don't even know if Caldor still exists. These are all East Coast, and they're moving massive amounts of materials around, both with electronics and software, and developed the principle, which is probably used today by everyone for how you track motion along a conveyor system. And without a lot of software to be used, it actually was really straightforward. They just didn't have those thoughts in those days. I did, and probably should have patented it. And I was probably a little too young to patent it at that time, and still it's still used today. And then got involved with some audio research when I moved to New York City. and I had a partner who was a classical conductor, Juilliard, and we sort of began to look at manipulating sound. And he was using like ARP synthesizers, very analog stuff. And
Joseph Lyons we're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I said, I think a lot of this could probably be done with computers. And I looked at a variety of small computer platforms because we had a very limited budget. And I chose the Atari 800.
Cool. So I understand why he was into music, because he was, a musician and was taught at Juilliard and all that. How did you get into that?
I have an unusual ear for sound and music, and I was one of the first people who could hear all the complex things that he would do in his studio with the synthesizers. And he said there was no one else that he ever met who could hear it so clearly and so distinctly. It was like having a conductor's hearing. My hearing was every bit as sensitive and discerning as his was. And so that was like the beginning, and then I started working on software, and it took a while for us to pull it together, but I developed Virtuoso Software, and we had to have some additional hardware because the Atari game machine was not 100% adequate for doing it. It had a great visual system, but lacked some things in sound. And so I built this cartridge. It was wire-wrapped cartridge that fit into the slot of the game machine and brought all these additional capabilities to the machine. So, we could do the software successfully.
Do you remember what kind of things it added?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. This is a very long time ago. Let's see. I know we added lots of additional memory. That was a major one. And I must admit, at this point, I don't I remember there was the cartridge, we had slots, cables, and a wire wrap board. And what did we put on there? It's been, this was like, we're talking maybe 81 or 2. It's been a while.
Sure. So
I don't remember the entire, what we put on that darn board. And we embedded a lot of the software as firmware. Mm-hmm. I think that was one of the prime things to do. Yeah, it was.
So what was the purpose? I mean, what was the vision of what this thing did? Was it to make music? Was it to make sound effects? Was it?
It was definitely to make music. It was definitely to make music. And I had to get really innovative about the software design because there were so many musical variations to be done with this and just frequency manipulation. At some point it dawned on me that everything that we were doing could be manipulated, like literally down. I could go in and manipulate the actual shape of the sine wave going in, and could like seriously change the curvature of the sine wave just via software. And that was a concept which was revolutionary in those days. And one of the big things to do is to be able to like learn how to figure out how to do real-time transposition, musical transposition, change the scales and variety of other musical characteristics, speed of the playback, and the Atari game machine had a sound chip which divided every octave into 100 steps. So that was, that's not a musical division because obviously music doesn't work that way, but the computer sure as hell works that way. And I said, we can massage this thing, and I have to put together some sort of system of rationale so that this is controllable in real time. And so I said this should be coupled to some sort of visual system that will work for manipulating this. And the Atari game machine, of course, had a wide variety of graphic capabilities and what effectively were graphic objects. And I think that my recollection, if I go back all the time, I think they called them sprites at that time.
Right.
And so I said, I can use this to create a visual system that we can tie to manipulate the audio, and which is what I did. And I had to develop a set of interlinks between the capabilities that I had developed in the audio section to things on the visual side in such a way as you could actually make sense of it. And because notes were inadequate, and notes didn't describe, hundredth of a step or hundredth steps inside of an octave. They might have certain, they might correspond to certain points in there. They didn't always, by the way. Were not musically thought about. They were thought about for game machine sounds. The kind of stuff that you put on a moving sprite, make it go psh, psh. So I came up with a whole system for basically modulating the sound by making changes in the video graphics. And one of the major things that, of course, in today's music is a given is that a lot of patterns loop. And I would argue that machine that I developed in 1981 was the first digital looper. Because that's exactly what it did, and it did a lot of looping. And then you could transpose, I don't even remember anymore how many loops one could do simultaneously with it. I think it was at least 16, maybe deeper levels of looping. And, now almost everything that you hear in modern DJ activities, they're loops and layers of loops.
Sure.
And so I would, I think I have a valid claim to say that it was the first digital looper.
That's really cool. Very interesting. I read an article that includes an interview with you from 1988 that said you had written 1.2 megabytes of source code.
Something like that. Something like that. And it kept getting, more and more complex. And I remember back then, I think I called it GLIMPS, GLIMPS, graphic language for interactive multiprocessing systems, or something along those lines. And that was a whole concept of how you modulated and handled audio. It was very definitely it was object oriented. Mm-hmm. It was not. They were in parallel. There was a lot of development going on in C++, object oriented. This was a completely different concept. and I never, which is where I sort of pursued this thing, and I also was able to manipulate all the graphic entities by using the same exact system of modulations and it was related to calculus dx dt, modulating over time, and the whole system worked actually quite well, and was the other view of object-oriented, and I had hoped to take it into a chip format, which would we would be able to digitize sound, audio directly using a chip device to create these representations. I know a couple of companies later did such a thing, and I think one of them was called Dallas Technologies, and this was far after the fact of what I had. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they were that successful, but then again, you would have needed the kind of control systems I had on top of it to make it useful.
Mm-hmm. So when this came out as an actual product, well, first of all, I need to ask, you don't still have that wire wrapped cartridge or any of the source code, do you?
No.
I have interviewed people who still had source code in their attic, so I need to.
Somewhere along the way it bit the dust.
Sure. So when this was released as a actual product, it was on floppy disk. It didn't require special hardware. So did you figure out how to integrate those features using the Atari hardware, or did you have to drop features on the floor?
You had to drop some features. I remember that. With the cartridge in place, it just totally rocked, much faster. And it was a subset. Mm-hmm. And there was you couldn't find anybody to really fund the cartridge development at that time.
Mm-hmm. Did you manage to get this in the hands of any well-known musicians? I could see Herbie Hancock or something. This might have been right in his wheelhouse at the time. Did you try that?
It was one of the things was it was really an alternative view on music. It was too bleeding edge, you might say.
Yeah.
And these kind of things happen, for a number of things, I was probably 5 years or so too early on a number of different things that I went after.
But this did make it to market. Did it sell at all? Do you know?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I think it was just more of it was very esoteric.
Yeah. Well, the articles I read about it at the time are very excited by it. These computer magazines seem to see the possibility. Now, that doesn't mean it's not esoteric, or it certainly doesn't mean it's mainstream, but it certainly seemed like it was cutting edge, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, I took the rationale for it and headed into set-top box chip development, and then said I knew it could manipulate visuals as easily as it could manipulate the sound. I said it was just honestly took out the spreadsheets and said this is the market for sound, this is the market for video and graphics, and the audio market was too small even to consider getting an investor to come in,
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and developed a chip, which I still have I'm looking at it on my wall right now, which is a set-top box chip.
Oh, neat. But before you got there, somehow, I don't understand this leap. I hope you can explain it to me. You guys had a development license agreement with Second Mate Systems, a marine navigation software systems company, to adapt its Virtuoso software technology to use on boats. And I don't get it. I hope you can explain this to me. How music software relates
well,
to...
I have forgotten about that one, and this has been like eons.
Yeah.
The idea was to be able to take sonar data and re-represent it visually in a different fashion, and control sonar probes.
Did it work? Did you ever have a prototype of that?
Never got it to all the way. We ran out of money.
So what happened to the company? I've read a little bit about it, but it's not entirely clear to me. Can you ran out of money, and then what happened?
Well, in the long run, we went our separate ways.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Sure.
And you know, I continued on in the computer business in early video and graphic object design and chips, and then brought a new company into existence, and we went for set-top box interactive control, and it went through a bunch of different instantiations.
And at one point, you guys were looking at creating a Midi interface for the Atari. Is that a thing that came out?
It never came out.
Okay. Were there any other ideas for things that?
Midi is, for all of its pluses, is not that good at representing data at synchronous moments, and it still is not. It is a almost impossible challenge to synchronize, even with today's computers and stuff, to synchronize two DJ systems with a MIDI interface for to carry the synchronization signal. It just, the odds are they will fall out of synchronization within minutes, and that's an inherent design flaw in MIDI. And so that was not only is it true today, it was true all the way back at the beginning. And so MIDI eventually had to be, we thought we could solve it, but it wasn't a solvable problem. Design of MIDI is incorrect for that, at least. Good for carrying notes, works fine, but for carrying clocking signals, I mean, I had a sort of, I was out of the whole audio area until about 8 years ago when I actually became a DJ, and I'm fairly well known now, at least in this part of the country. And I've done some international appearances. I do big events, and it's not my living, but it's very entertaining, and people seem to really like it. I've played some really major stuff as a DJ now.
You said you're in Sebastopol, is that right?
Yeah. And my DJ name is Feral, like feral cat, and you can find me on Facebook. I've got a following, and it's like I took to looping systems like Tractor. Just was so straightforward for me. I looked at it and went, oh, look at that. Gosh, look what they're doing. And I always had a really interesting taste in music, and apparently people really seem to like what I like and like what I do. And 8 years ago, I was just at one of these festivals, and I brought a sound system for that Gowdy was going to play on, and when I got all set up and stuff, I'll throw some of the stuff I have in the on there, and all of a sudden people are going, what's that? And one thing led to another. All of a sudden in the San Francisco Underground, and I chose Tractor because it actually does loops very well. And and it keeps them synchronized. Hardware is much better these days than so is software. And since then, I actually have I can't call it a career, but I'm certainly known.
I talked to Richard, and he was kind of hung up with the idea that part of like Virtuoso became Java, and I'm wondering how you.
That was incorrect. Richard is not tight on the details on these things. Richard actually called me out of the blue. I hadn't heard from Richard in 25 years, and he called me out of the blue, and that's definitely not true.
So if you could send a message to the Atari computer community that still exists, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
Well, the Atari machines were totally the bomb at the time. I mean, you couldn't do much anything better than the Commodore. Wasn't nearly as good. I actually did duplicate this on the Commodore, but it was not nearly as good. And I mean, Nolan and the Ataris had their act together at that time, and we took advantage of it, and it was some of the best hardware at the time.
Did you ever take this to Atari and show it off to them directly?
Yeah. I mean, it was. I met with Nolan Bushnell, and I've run into him every now and then. He still remembers me. And at the time, they were undergoing a wicked reorg.
Mm-hmm.
And Atari was getting lobotomized.
Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this is where timing is can be everything. This is unfortunately everything bad. Atari was in no position to take any advantage of what I was showing them. Zero. And I mean, they knew it was good stuff. And so that's what happened with Atari. Because I had moved out here in 1989 to California. That was already at the end of Atari's lifespan.
Yeah. What haven't I asked you about those days that I should have?
It's a great, it was really innovative and great time. And most of the development was occurring from New York, and I'll tell you, if we had been out here in California in the mid '80s, that might have made quite a difference. Because that time would have been very feasible to take it to when Atari had the right pieces together.
Problem with geography sometimes.
Yeah, and we weren't exactly flush in those days either, so you couldn't just jet set out from New York City to Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
that was a restriction for sure. Do you remember the source code though? It was thick. We had printouts in those days.
Well, Richard sent me a couple of versions of the software, which I'm going to scan and put online. Yeah, I think there's the official release version and then also kind of a preliminary version. So.
Yep. I'll be blunt about it. I can't remember the difference between the two anymore.
Well, the preliminary version, I haven't tried them both yet. There was a version called the Play Mode Sampler, which I have tried, which is basically a demo that plays music.
Right.
So I've tried that, and then the actual software I haven't tried yet. But the preliminary version says it doesn't have the telecommunications portion, which is in the release version. And I was confused because I don't understand what telecommunications had to do with this product at all. It was music and visual software.
I'm trying to remember too. Ooh. Did we ever? See, we must have done something with that. What was it? You might have to look at the manual. I no longer remember on the what we did with the telecommunications.
Okay.
It needed a modem.
Sure. Well, I do have the manual. I just haven't read it yet.
It might have been for synchronization, actually.
Mm.
And as I recall, also was better with a either a trackball or a graphic tablet.
Oh, okay. More finer control than joystick, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't want, I don't have the hardware anymore.
I think I have what I need. Thank you so very much.
Okay, thank you.
And here's the interview with Richard Lewis.
I have an undergraduate degree in general business, accounting, and marketing, as well as a master's of business, an MBA in finance and international business from New York University. I was in business and then in banking back then. I first became aware of computers probably in the early 1970s while at Chase Manhattan Bank. We were looking for an analysis of a company, and we had gotten these spreadsheets from one investment banking firm in Indianapolis, and we had asked for changes in the spreadsheets and such, and 2 days later they send us new ones. Didn't understand how they could get those things so quick, but so a couple of days later we went out to Indianapolis, and I saw these little boxes on all the analysts' desks with a little apple on it, and I believe it was VisiCalc that they were using, which was the first computer and use of a computer that I had ever seen. Subsequent to that, we were able to complete the deal and get things done. But subsequent to that, we were going to do a leverage buyout. Again, this is still at Chase Manhattan Bank, of the distribution division, or part of the distribution division of DEC, Digital Equipment. When I wrote up the write-up and we sent it up the approval channel, basically at a fairly high level, it was turned down because the Chase Credit Committee said that PCs are just a passing fancy and they'll never work their way into mainstream accounting, or rather mainstream business, which I wish I still had that memo. But anyway, that's where I first became aware of computers. So on the business side, I was probably one of the first people that knew how to spell computer. After I had gone to General Electric Capital, doing pretty much the same thing, I was doing some consulting for a VC firm in New York City, and he sent me uptown to this one company. At the time it was called ETA, that had a software product. The software product at the time was a music product. And the two principals, Joseph Lyons and Frank Schwartz, Joseph being the inventor, so to speak, and Frank being the programmer that put his ideas into code. I stayed with them for a couple of hours. I saw Frank Schwartz put together Rubik's Cube for about the first time, and back then he did it, I think, in 10 minutes or so, which was incredible. But they had Joseph, who was at Juilliard School. He was a professor at Juilliard School. He was an assistant conductor at the Cleveland Symphony. And then he became Dr. Space, where he was going around to campuses with his electrolyzed oboe. And he wanted to invent an instrument. So they had invented this, or were in the throes of inventing this music program, and that's when we got involved with Atari and such, because it was for the what was it, the Atari 120 or whatever the first machine was.
Right. The program worked with the 600, 800 XL machines.
Right. Yeah. And it was a music product, a software product. at the time when we went out to Atari, they were having a problem. I don't know what. There was a technical issue with some software, and that they hadn't been able to resolve. They asked Frank if Frank could help them out, and Frank resolved the problem in about 20 minutes, a half hour, something that they had been working on for quite a while. And that's the type of individual that Frank was. I mean, just a complete genius in many, many aspects. So we had developed this music program, and it was ripped off by a couple of firms when we went out to California, but we didn't really care because at that time, Joseph had called me one morning about 3 o'clock in the morning saying that what's the difference between sight and sound, audio and visual? And I said, what are you talking about? And he says, well, what's the difference? I said, I don't know. And he said, it's in frequencies. I mean, volume is amplitude, and just going down the line, and it's a question of frequencies. So what came out of that was probably the first real-time graphics program. And that's one of the things we were talking to, I guess the major thing we were talking to Atari about, what that is. And we had done, at that time, an initial public offering for the product, and that was called the product was Virtuoso, and the company was Virtusonics. And again, that was a publicly traded company. And we had gotten and distributed several, in effect, really beta copies of it, which were just, very preliminary, and after that, basically, we were criticized by a lot of the top names in computers back in the 80s as how can these, the small company in an apartment in New York City come up with something that we've been working on for years and we can't do. And there were some of the top experts in the company at country, I should say, at Harvard and such, that completely dismissed it. So that was really where we were and how the Atari program came out and the initial program came out, of which I think I had sent you the copies, or a copy of the program itself in the packaging. And then we had gone in a different direction. We'd come out with a version for Commodore, so we had Commodore and Atari, but sales weren't very big. And at that time, we were going to do a secondary offering, and the secondary offering was coming out in, but it was supposed to go live on Black Monday, which was, I believe, in 87 or 88 back then. And it was buried because of that. A VC firm in Canada came and what we thought wanted to invest in the company. They were feeding us money, and then they said that they wanted the technology, and they wanted the two main techies, which were Joseph Lyons and Frank Schwartz, and basically I was left, with a bunch of worthless stock, and the company moved out to California, Silicon Valley, and it became very interesting. They had a number of consultants. Now, this is just from my memory, and I'm not going to swear by it and say it's 100% accurate, but it's to the best of my memory. There were two consultants at that time from Sun Microsystems. I think there was an interest by, I think IBM and a couple of other large companies who had, supplied consultants in what was happening. It just, I guess it just never made it. But at some point, there was the company was, or the Frank and Joseph were given some money to take the company into Chapter 11. And to the best of my knowledge, that the attorneys that for both Virtusonics and Sun Microsystems was one and the same. And it's my belief, again, that Sun Microsystems paid Frank and Joseph to take the company into bankruptcy so they could acquire the software, the technology from that. The reason I say that, and again, my memory is shabby and I haven't completed my research, that when Sun Microsystems patented Java, that the first paragraph or so was taken verbatim from the our business plan, and I'm still looking to find that information. I haven't had the opportunity to get to either the patent office filings or the New York Times, which would have been sometime in March, I believe, of 1995, when Sun filed the patent for Java. As I say, so I believe that somehow Frank and Joseph had done a major part in the development of Java with, again, the first real-time graphics program in the 80s. And pretty much that's the story in a nutshell.
Wow, that's quite a story. So you were the CEO, is that right?
Yes, I was the CEO and CFO of the company.
Cool. So in my research and articles, I found some articles that seemed just very excited about this Virtuoso desktop performance studio software. One said it was one of the most original applications for the Atari computers since Print Shop, and which was a big deal. And I just kind of wanted to get your take on how this was unique and what it could have been and why it wasn't.
Well, as I say, I'm not a techie. My current line is, yes, I just got certified. I took a course and I am now certified to turn a light switch on and off. My technological capabilities are not much greater than that. So I really can't say what it is, but as I said, it started off as a music program. Because of just the frequency difference between light and sound, it became a graphics program. The graphics program was not fully developed. As I said, you had to be pretty much know software and know how to get around it to run the program, even though it was on an Atari. From there, as I said, that we had gotten away from the Atari, and it had ended up through a couple of machinations. I believe being part of the basis for Java. And I still have to do my research to make sure that my memory is clear, but I have also talked to some of the other associates that were involved with the company back then, the attorney, some of the consultants and advisors, and that they seem to concur with what I say, but I don't have the documentation to prove it. Again, I have to go to the library and look through. I think it's March 1995 issues of the New York Times. That on the inside page of the second section, they had listed patents of the week, and as I said, I believe that the Sun patent for Java was back then. So it went from a basic Atari music program up to perhaps Java. So they'll write in my epitaph that I own part of Java, and Sun really didn't do the breakthrough work on it. That it was Frank and Joe. Frank, when I spoke to him several weeks ago, denied this. But then again, Frank was hired by Sun, and he did some work, even though Frank said it was in a different area. And I'm sure there was some type of secrecy agreement that he signed. So although he's, as I say, a genius, that in this instance, he probably could not say anything and would not say anything and would deny it pursuant to a possible agreement. Again, this is just, guessing at it.
Conjecture, right. We talked about Frank. Let's talk about Joe a little bit. Do you know what his deal is?
I know, but I'd rather not say it at this time. Joe was a genius on the other side. As I said, he had gone to Juilliard School. He had taught at the Juilliard School. He was a guest conductor at the Cleveland Symphony. And then from that, there used to be a picture on his piano of him in tails and a baton, conducting. And next to that was a picture of him as Dr. Space. he had long, wavy, light brown hair, and he used to have white robes, going around to college campuses with his electric oboe, and Joseph was very much into Eastern philosophies and such. So that was his life, and again, he wanted to. His goal in life at the time was to invent an instrument, and he was introduced to Frank. I guess it was sometime in the late 70s or early 80s. I don't recall completely, and Frank said, he can do what Joseph wanted to do, and thus the first thing that came out was the music program.
So this may have been after you left. I'm not sure. I think it probably was. But I read a couple of things that said that Virtusonics was entering a development and licensing agreement with a marine navigation company to adopt its interface for boating systems, where you would be able to take your computer and a monitor on a boat to plot your courses. And that seems just so far and away different from music software.
Well, again, everything moved away from music pretty early early in one stage, the Atari stage, because of the real-time graphics. And yes, I mean, I was there for the marine application to it. I don't remember exactly how it was, but it was able to plot courses and such for navigation. I don't remember the agreement that was signed per se, but I guess it was too primitive at that time, a program to really take off. I don't know if anything happened afterwards, but as I say, up to the time that I left was right before they went to California. They were talking to them.
So does the whole thing? Was it? How do you feel about it now? I mean, do you feel like it was an exciting time, or does this whole thing just leave a bad taste in your mouth, or what? How do you feel?
Oh no! I mean, it was a very, very exciting time. The major problem that we had, and the biggest lesson I learned from it, is if you have a product or a thought that's ahead of the learning curve or ahead of the curve, which Frank and Joseph were probably by 7-8 years in their thinking, that unless you have very deep pockets, it's going to be difficult to get financing. And then there's always the possibilities of the larger firms basically absconding with your with your software, with your code, whatever. And I'm not saying that's what happened per se. That it's something that would have to be further investigated. But I mean, some of the support that we had, that we ended up getting from some of the experts, was really incredible. As some of the things that you've uncovered, in the press and everything. But I think overall, except for the possibility of sun, that it was above everybody's head. And I mean, that was both the exciting part and the bad part. I'm sure that you and your listeners have heard on several occasions those inventors that came up with a product that was definitely just blasted out of the way by large corporations. Sure. I remember reading management books and everything with GM. There was a situation where now we're talking about the probably 50s, 60s, and 70s that had invented a better wiper blade, and it got killed because of the other people that were supplying the wipers to General Motors. And several years after the guy died or whatever it was, they adopted the wipers. And there's many situations like that. They're classic, and it's something that you have to, as an entrepreneur with a new idea, it's something that you have to protect yourself as best you can one of the ways that we tried to have it, because once a patent is out there, it can be reverse engineered. I mean, as we hear every day between all the big giants and Google and was it Google who they had a lawsuit with on something. Well, there was one over Java back about 2002, 2003.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just to be very, very careful. We tried doing it by having patent pending, so you didn't have to. At that point, you didn't have to release the patent itself. No one could see it, and it would keep it more secure. Again, now we're at the edge of my knowledge of the patent system and such. But whatever happened, as I said, that with Sun and Virtusonics, or ETA at the time, having the same attorneys, the same patent attorneys, and the patent attorneys being the major attorneys for Sun. And at the time, I didn't have any more money or such when it was going down, and I would have needed the attorneys that I had, friends out in San Francisco, tried to get information, but they were blackballed both by again, at this point, it's almost hearsay, and because I don't have facts to prove. It's just information I had received from other people. That they got blackballed by both the attorneys, and also when it was taken into Chapter 7, there was, let's say, a lot of improper things happened by the bankruptcy attorney and such, but I didn't have any money to follow up on it to break through the barrier that was set up. And again, I want to emphasize again, at this point, it's just hearsay, and I wouldn't, at this point, I wouldn't say it's what truth there is or there isn't.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to know. Yeah. Very interesting.
So that's it. As I said, that now I sort of joke about it, that if what I am thinking and what I believe to be the case, they'll unless something happens, my epitaph will be that he owns Java.
Before your epitaph happens, what do you do today?
Right now, I'm semi-retired, but I do financial consulting for small businesses, small medium-sized businesses, in helping them get financing when they can't get it from traditional sources. They might be too new. The company had losses. Any of the reasons that the banks can say no. As I say, I work with companies in terms of getting them financing. It's usually secured financing, accounts receivable financing, purchase order financing, machinery and equipment. And being in Northern Virginia, I've developed a little more of an expertise into doing the same thing for government contractors, because dealing with the government is considerably different than dealing in the commercial world.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah. So that keeps me busy.
Good.
I mean, that with during the summer, well, even though the weather, these days is so on and off, looking to go out maybe over the weekend and play some golf.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm getting by, just doing it, enjoying.
Good.
So nothing too much you can ask for, except it would be nice to. Again, the statute of limitations has definitely expired on Java, but it would be fun to be able to prove it. And then I believe it's Oracle that had bought Sun.
I think so.
Just to throw into the mix that Sun possibly stole the patent for Java. I won't say stole, but obtained it under less than completely kosher means.
Sure. Is there anything I haven't asked you about that time that I should have?
No, I don't think so. It was a period of 4 years or so that I was involved, and it was going on probably. Well, I mean, Joseph and Frank both had the idea beforehand, before I was introduced to them, as I said, by going back by a VC firm that just didn't know no one knew how to spell computer back in those days. So I was considered somewhat of an expert because I could spell it. And then it was, as I say, a question of putting in my own money, getting family and friends to invest, and then going public. It was a very interesting experience. I learned a lot of lessons. Many of them are very applicable to business today. Again, specifically as an entrepreneur inventor, when you invent something, if you're ahead of the curve, you have to have very deep pockets, and that's the major thing that learned from it.
Well, a good lesson to know, I think. Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you so much. I think I have what I need.
Okay, thank you.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, there are two ways you can help. You can help fund these interviews directly by contributing to my Patreon. A small monthly contribution will help offset the expenses of making these oral history interviews. Contribute at patreon.com/Savitz. Or make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.